let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And for those not familiar with the Rebels defense, what kind of scheme do they run?
Yeah, under DC Mike Scherer, who followed Barry Odom over from Arkansas. It was more of a 3-3-5 last year. I think we're going to see some more elements of the 4-2-5 this year. No matter what they do as far as the scheme, they're going to be anchored in the middle by linebacker Jackson Woodard, who is one of the best middle linebackers in the country and kind of came out of nowhere after also following Barry Odom, the guy that recruited him to Arkansas and was his head coach for 2 years. He followed him over to UNLV, and really his confidence in Coach Odom was rewarded. He had a career season last year and is really, really the anchor of this defense, which has a ton more depth in the defensive backfield. That was the big issue last year towards the end of the season, especially just no depth in the defensive backfield. They really made it a focus and absolutely hammered the DBs when it came to the transfer portal this offseason.
Well, let's talk about the guys up front, that defensive line. The main loss for this D line was Darius Johnson, who graduated. Otherwise, this room looks pretty deep and brought back like 8 or so guys who had some sort of playing time in 2023. How did that unit look in the spring?
Look good as far as being able to adapt to some of the changing elements of the go-go offense. You know, it's one of those situations almost like, I don't know, Air Force or Hawaii or something like that, where your defense goes up against such a unique and peculiar offense on a day-to-day basis that when they see a more traditional pro-style one-back system, it's kind of just like, oh, okay, we're dumbing down a lot of elements of what we do in the communication and the at the line of scrimmage audibling. So it's going to be interesting to see this defensive line with a lot of returners if they're able to plug the run in the middle, because that was the area where this unit struggled last season, was just having a true run stopper. They're going to have a lot of the same bodies, Cooper Webb, Osei Agbase in the middle. A new name as well that came in for the spring, Antonio Doyle, who was at Texas A&M and then had spent the last year or two at Jackson State. He's trying to anchor this unit that had just 26 sacks all of last year, only 12 and a half sacks coming from defensive linemen. They got a ton of sacks from Jonathan Baldwin, blitzing safeties, blitzing linebackers. Yeah, just 12 and a half sacks in a season coming from your defensive line. That's a number that won't cut it, so they're going to need to make some adjustments for this year.
So who else do you think is on that line? You mentioned Doyle and Webb. Maybe I missed another one, but who do you think are those starters there?
Webb is actually absolutely going to get the chance. Jalen Dixon. Osei Agbase is another name, returning starter from last year, that's going to have the opportunity to have a ton of playing time. Aside from that, it's not a terribly deep room. Wasali Muvesi is a returning player. He hasn't played a ton. I'm just looking down the roster here. Max Mogelson is a really intriguing prospect, but he's a freshman. Alexander Whitmore and Tat Martinson. Those are the two names, two seniors that are going to get some chances as well, either at the defensive end spot or at that tackle position. Whitmore out of Austin Peay, former homeschool national champion when he was in high school. And then Tat Martinson, the junior college transfer who came right before last year. Those are going to be the other two guys. Also keep an eye on Keith Conley. That's a guy who got some playing time towards the end of last year, another JUCO transfer that should see some time on this defensive line that really rotates a ton. The reason they got so much depth is because they're going to need it. Whether it's a 3-3-5 or the 4-2-5, they're going to need to have some guys that not only are able to be flexible in terms of going in and out of the game, but being flexible in terms of moving inside and outside as far as D tackle versus D end.
All right, well, let's talk about this linebacking group. It looks strong, but maybe not that deep here in 2024. They brought back their top 2 leading tacklers from a year ago, and Marcel McDuffie, and then, as the aforementioned first-team All-Mountain West linebacker Jackson Woodard. How did that group look in the spring?
Look good, look confident, especially with Woodard and McDuffie leading the charge. Reason that they are running a lot of these 4-2-5 looks is because of those two guys, because they're able to. They do so many things well. Woodard is more of a true run stopper, but he finished last year with 2 picks, including a pick 6 against rival Nevada. He's able to step up in the passing game if needed, but he's more of the run stopper in the middle. McDuffie, more of a true outside linebacker if you had to pick between those two, but he really does a good job as well. He's short, he's squat, he's 6'1", 240, and does a good job of plugging holes in the run game as well. So if it is just those two guys, that's totally fine. The other 2 names that were brought in were Manny Powell, transfer from Arkansas, who's kind of opening some eyes, and then a true freshman out of Kansas City, Melvin Laster, who's brought in and has been given some opportunities. It's been interesting to see this linebacker core that looked to be so set. They brought in the new body. They brought in the new freshman. And I don't know if you've gotten the chance to play the NCAA video game yet, but in the Dynasty, Melvin Laster turns into a dog at middle linebacker. He turns out phenomenally. So he's a guy that, at least in the video game world, progresses really well, and he's going to have a chance to learn behind two, if not three, really, really solid linebackers ahead of him.
Well, when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, the defensive backfield was probably hit the hardest between the portal and graduation. However, this room is highlighted by the return of Jonathan Baldwin, Jet Elad, and Cameron Oliver. What did the staff do to address those losses in the room?
It was interesting. If you look at the names of the guys that left, you can kind of tell based on, maybe not the greatest scheme fit. I know there may or may not have been a couple of guys that, you know, we're kind of like, hey, am I going to play? And the coaching staff basically said, no, we're going to bring in new guys. We're going to replace you. You can stay if you want. But that's a conversation that happens at every school nowadays. That's not anything out of the normal. But those three guys that you had mentioned coming back are really going to make a difference. And the three guys coming in that I think are really going to make an impact as well. Former 5-star cornerback Tony Grimes, who started his college career at UNC, graduated high school a year early to go compete for the Tar Heels, then transferred to Texas A&M, had missed just about all of last year with a lingering lower body injury, but he figures to start at one of the cornerback spots. And the two safeties they brought in, Power 5 guys out of Texas and Arkansas, in Jalen Catalon and Malik Chavis. Those are going to be two guys that, along with Baldwin and Oliver in the defensive backfield, are really going to turn this from a weakness with last year's team to a strength from this year's squad. Baldwin is more of the step up and make your sacks and come crashing in from the strong safety spot. Cameron Oliver is your true possession cornerback. I think it's going to be Oliver and Grimes as your two starting cornerbacks. And if that's the case, they did just fine in the transfer portal. And then between Catalon and Chavis, there's going to be some rotation going on and some different looks as well. Jet Elad also in that linebacking core, as you had mentioned, plays kind of the star, almost a nickelback role. So we'll see him dropping back in coverage a lot. So this defensive backfield, like I had said, really was a weakness last year. I think it's going to be a strength this year. We heard Barry Odom yesterday in his press conference talk about, really for the first time, that with how short they were personnel-wise last year in the defensive backfield, that they had to adjust their scheme and really got beat over the top in some instances where they normally wouldn't. So I think by going out and getting those three guys in the portal, Grimes, Catalon, and Chavis, and then returning Baldwin, Oliver, and Jet Elad at that star position, they're going to really, really have the opportunity to turn that back end of the defense into a strength.
Who needs to step up in this group in order for this defensive backfield to be successful in 2024?
I think it's the new guys. You know what you're going to get for Cameron Oliver. He leads the team in picks coming back. You know what you're going to get from Jonathan Baldwin, that head down streaking style coming in from the strong safety spot. But I'm going to put it back on those three guys that I mentioned, Chavis, Catalon, and Grimes. I think Tony Grimes especially. I'm sure personally he has a lot to prove in his final year of college football, coming off of some disappointing stops. So, no other way to put it, at UNC and Texas A&M. Those 5-star guys certainly feel pressure to live up to the 5-star label. And the Catalon and Chavis Power 5 transfers in their final years, they're looking to make a dominant showing and really show that they could compete at the next level. I think that they are the type of athlete that could do that. I think Catalon especially, maybe not the biggest, but he is fast. He's a streak of lightning. So it's going to be those three guys, Grimes, Catalon, and Chavis, the three newcomers in the defensive backfield, because they're going to get every opportunity right off the bat to play.
Well, I asked you on the offensive side, so I got to ask you on the defensive side. If you have to pick a defensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who are you picking?
Maybe not breakout in the sense of, hadn't been great and really started to do well, because Cameron Oliver has been a really, really good competitor and a really solid player in the Mountain West Conference for years. But all of a sudden, we're starting to hear whispers of NFL. And I think that, it's a put up or shut up year for guys like that, where, if he goes out and, if he gets hurt, like I'm saying, knocking on wood here, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do about that, and the timing would be bad. But if you go out and you get shelled, you get beat over the top, you can't make your tackles, blah, 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 whatever goes into a solid cornerback at this level, that's it for him. That's it. He has to go out and show that he belongs and that he can compete at the NFL level. He's a good cornerback size at 6'1", $175, and it's just going to be about a matter of downfield presence. And if he has a great year, I think Cam Oliver is Sunday bound next year.
Well, fall camp just opened yesterday as we're taping this on a Saturday, August 3rd. Which position group or groups do you feel is the most concerning heading into camp here?
That is interesting. I think it's maybe not concerning is the right word, because there is genuine excitement just about across the board. But it's going to be about the special teams. And James Shebest, rather, probably the best special teams coordinator on the West Coast, one of the best in the country, they're replacing one of the best kickers in the program history, one of the best kickers in the history of the Mountain West in Jose Pisano. So it's going to be about how they replace the kicking game. And, you were expecting me to go with a bigger position group that we had already mentioned, but the special teams is a huge, huge element for this team. Marshall Nichols was one of the best punters in the country last year. He led the Mountain West in opponent's starting field position, but that kicking spot, really a four-dog race right now. They brought in 3 freshmen, including Ramon Villela, Caden Chittenden, who I think has the inside track on the job, and Isaac Mancera, Andre Biono, the returning starter, the former Fresno State Bulldog, as well, competing for the job. Jose Pisano, 27 of 29 last year in field goals, first-team All-American biathlon. And they're going to try to find a way to replace that production, because if you don't have to worry about the kicking game, that opens up so many more elements, and it gives you the opportunity to where, 4th and 2 from the opponent 30, you don't have to go for it early in the game. You can take your 3 points. You hear about the college kickers all the time. That this kicking situation, I think, is going to be one that plays out, and it's one that not a lot of people have really talked about yet. Outside of that, to give you a kind of more traditional answer, I think it's going to be about the play of the defensive line and just who gets the playing time early and how they work out that rotation, because they got a bunch of guys who play both D end and D tackle. So I think it's going to be about just finding the right spots and finding the right rotation for these guys on the D line as well.
What would you say the main strength is for this team?
Versatility and depth at certain positions, especially in the running back room and now in the defensive backfield. Like I had said, this go-go offense requires you to be flexible. It requires you to be a great teammate. Brendan Marion, his favorite quote, the offensive coordinator, all the time, his quote is, "What you do without the ball determines how much you love your teammates." So you see a ton of guys flying all around, making blocks 50 yards away from it. And it is a style of play that is fast. It's up tempo, a lot of physical running. So it does really grind on guys, especially the wideouts that are asked to block a lot, the tight ends that are asked to block a lot. So the versatility and the flexibility of some of the positions that they have, especially on the offense, is really, really going to be a strength. And on the defensive side, I think the strength is all of a sudden the depth, not only in the DB room, but in the linebacking core as well. Some of the other guys they brought in.
Well, when it comes to the recruitment of new players and the retention of existing player, how has NIL and the transfer portal impacted UNLV?
So they did a great job in the portal this offseason, especially with the DBs. Keep harkening back to that, but that was the biggest need for them. They went out and attacked a lot of their needs, and we'll see if they end up starting either of the 2 FCS transfers they got at quarterback. I think, right now it likely could be one of those 2, but Cam Friel, the incumbent, has been given every opportunity to earn the job, and they're splitting equal reps. As far as the NIL goes, UNLV is in a very unique position because of the casinos around and a lot of the money that flows through those. And so the UNLV has it's Friends of UNILV is their group as far as their NIL clearinghouse, and they've got to deal with the Palms Casino, who's owned by the Fertitta family. Now the practice complex is named the Fertitta Family Complex, so they've been a friend of the program, big donor, big boosters forever, and so they've got it set up with the Palms Casino and Resort as far as a lot of NIL things, a lot of NIL events. And that's definitely something that is developing. We saw, obviously, all the Power 5 teams with the resources, the time, the money, the bodies at the end of the day to go crazy with NIL right off the bat. Not as many car dealerships out here as there are in Tuscaloosa, Alabama as well. But we're starting to see it develop with both the football and the basketball program here at UNLV as far as the tie-ins with the local casinos, tie-ins with some car dealerships, I say in all seriousness, and some of the other local businesses. So, I mean, Vegas is big business as far as money flowing in and as far as the entertainment industry. So we're starting to see a lot more tie-ins there. And I think moving forward, Vegas, like I mentioned at the beginning, is in a really unique position to help out this program and to do some really, really cool, unique things that you just wouldn't get anywhere else. You can't go to Oxford, Mississippi and go to the biggest casino in the world. You can't go to, Blacksburg, Virginia and go on the highest freestanding building west of the Mississippi. I mean, there's so many different things to do in Las Vegas and so many cool experiences and industries that it's really, really going to be developing. And it really has already started with UNLV with their retention of some of the big guys like a Ricky White, like you had mentioned.
Well, it seems more and more across college football that the demands of a head coach are really turning into more of a general manager type role between recruiting high school seniors, player retention. It almost seems like game to game now, and then fundraising and less of kind of the X's and O's part of the role. What are you seeing there happening at UNLV?
I mean, generally speaking, I would agree with that sentiment that it is becoming more of a general managing type role. But that's the bear that we've created in college football. And keep in mind too that the fundraising element of it may look a little different now, but that has always been a part of a head coaching job at a big time D1 program, even at a school the size of UNLV that has now 5 winning seasons in the last 30 years. But it's a program on the rise, and for Barry Odom, yeah, he loves the X's and O's, but he's really unique in the sense of turning things over to his coordinators and position coaches. I mean, if you go watch a UNLV practice, Barry Odom's not doing a lot of one-on-one with players. He's not doing a lot of instruction as far as telling hey, we're going over here, we're doing this next. The plan is laid out ahead of time. It is 24 sessions of varying times. It is a tight knit, well run, well oiled machine as far as the practice plan, and a lot of it comes down to the coordinators and the pitching coaches. So or the pitching coaches, the position coaches. I mean, here in the middle of baseball season. But it's really hands-off approach, and that sounds worse than it is because his thumbprint is on every single part of this team, Coach Odom. But he does a really good job of trusting and turning things over to his coordinators in terms of the day-to-day instruction, grinding with the guys, the plan for practice, the plan for lifting, the plan for recovery. So, while that is certainly a changing role as far as a D1 head coach right now, turning into more of a general manager style, like you had said. It's something that Barry Odom, I think, kind of does anyway. That's just kind of his coaching style.
Well, what does success look like for the Rebels in 2024?
So, I mean, last year, 9-5 at the end of the day looks great. Got to keep in mind, they were 9-2 going into their final game of the regular season. They had lost to San Jose State, got into the Mountain West Championship, and got to host the Mountain West Championship game against Boise State on a tiebreaker. Lost that game with Boise State taking a commanding early lead and really just never surrendering the momentum in a true road game that played as a neutral site game. And then they lost in the bowl game against Kansas, who they'll rematch against in the third game of the year this year. That Kansas team, unheralded last year, they're really getting all the credit they deserve this year as far as being one of the top offenses in college football. And Coach Odom said even yesterday in his press conference that they just didn't have the depth to compete in that bowl game. By that time last year, there were guys already with a foot out the door that played in that game. There were guys that opted out of that game. They didn't have a lot of depth to begin with, especially in the defensive back room. So the depth is going to be a big thing. I think if they can get to 9 wins again, that is a phenomenal year. The schedule is a little bit tougher this year with 3 Power 5 games at Houston, home against Syracuse, and then at Kansas. So they're going to be really challenged at the beginning of the year to really, see who they are right off the bat. Now, the last 3 games of the year, San Diego State, San Jose State, Nevada, 3 new head coaches, 3 games at the end of the season where those 3 programs with a ton of turnover might not have a lot to play for. So if UNLV can have a really, really good record through the first 8-9 games of the year, they've got an opportunity to finish with 8, maybe 9 wins again if everything goes right at the beginning of the season. I mean, this year is going to be weird in general. 5 Friday night games. It's the first time ever. 11 out of 12 games on national TV for the first time in school history. They're also going up against 8 first-year head coaches in 12 games. So it's going to be some unique challenges and opportunities, like Coach Odom likes to say. He never says challenge. He says opportunity. It's going to be a unique opportunity to go up against a lot of new schemes, a lot of new guys and new programs. So there's going to be a lot of unknowns until, the whistle blows, that coin is flipped, and the opening kickoff is on the way. So, yeah, I 7, 8, 9 wins, very, very doable, especially if they can get off to a really hot start at the beginning of the year.
Well, Matt, we've talked a lot about different positions. We've talked about NIL. We've talked about special teams. Is there anything else that you want to share or think that we should know about this 2024 UNLV Rebels?
Yeah, just keep an eye on the offense, man. The defense is unique, and it's going to be much, much improved, especially in preventing deep passes ahead of them. But this offense is going to be so much fun. It's going to be one of the more fun offenses to watch in all of college football. And I think last year UNLV took a lot of people by surprise, and a lot of big-time people who may not be involved in the program. UNLV, they've never been any good. This is a flash in the pan under a first-year head coach. Teams are going to adjust. Yeah, adjustments are going to be made, but this offense is going to develop as well. Brennan Marion is a rising star in the coaching ranks. He will be a head coach someday. For his sake, he'd rather it be sooner than later. For the sake of the UNLV program, I hope it's later than sooner because he's so fun to watch, so fun to be around. He cares. He cares so much about these players. He is such a personalized style of coaching. This offense is going to be so unique. Whoever is at the quarterback, that quarterback battle is going to be the storyline up until the opening kickoff on August 31st at Houston. The running back room is deep. The running back room is unique. They're going to have some really, really kind of weird, funky looks. And I think we're going to see a lot more about UNLV's offense from the national scale this season.
Yeah, I think a lot of people got introduced to UNLV there against Kansas. I know they lost, but that was a pretty entertaining game to watch. But hey, Matt, I want to thank you again for sharing your time and knowledge with us today.
Absolutely, happy to help anytime, and yeah, best of luck on the rest of these little previews because it is a lot of work, and I commend you on the awesome work that you guys do.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Hey, if you are watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you are listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.